All right. So good morning. My name is Pam Batchelor, and I'm with the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction. And I'm super excited to be talking to you today about blended learning in SchoolNet. The first slide I want to go over is just a little bit about Microsoft Teams, which is the platform we're using for this meeting today. If you are not familiar with Microsoft Teams, there is in the center of your screen, there should be a console with several icons where you can mute and unmute as well as start your own video. I do ask that you stay muted unless you have a question. If you have a question, feel free to unmute and ask at any point in time. You can also type in questions in the chat. I do know that with Microsoft Teams, sometimes it might prompt you to download a client. You can actually use it just from your web browser, but sometimes if you're having difficulties with sound or with any other technical issues, downloading the Microsoft Teams agent will help you. So just keep that in mind. If anyone wants to type in the chat a brief hello and where you're from, that would be great to get us started this morning as we get ready to talk about SchoolNet. All right, thank you for that, Mary. Or Marcy, I'm sorry, Marcy, content coach from Rocky Mount. Toya is joining us from Charlotte. So just to note that the bit.ly for our slide deck today is going to be in the top right corner of every slide that I'm presenting. So if at any point in time you need the slide deck link, please look in the top right corner of your screen and you should see it for all of our slides today. So we're going to let folks log in. I see that we have 13 with us, and I believe there was a little over 30 registered. So we'll give everyone just one more minute and then we'll get started. Hi, Kelly from Guilford. And hi, Diane from Washington County. Valerie, good to see you again. Chapel Hill, Scarborough. It's always nice to see friendly faces. Just a note, I'm keeping my video off because Microsoft Teams seems to like me to either show my screen or my video, but not both. So I'm keeping my video off. All right, so I just put in the chat one more time the bit.ly to our slide deck for today. We are going to be going over SchoolNet and some tips and tricks for using it with both students that might be virtually in home and also those that might be on your campus in a small group. So I am the Digital Learning Systems Consultant for the home-based team. I manage the products of Canvas and GoOpenNC and currently SchoolNet, but that will be transitioning soon to my teammate John Mars. So I am excited to share with you about SchoolNet. Please follow me on Twitter if you don't, if you use Twitter to help build your professional learning network. I like to share out a lot of stuff about our home-based applications and free things, and also Google. I am a Google certified trainer as well, so feel free to reach out to me on Twitter. Love to connect with you. So today we're going to have kind of two parts for our presentation. We're going to talk about online remote learning and maybe how you could use SchoolNet for that, and then offline remote learning, because we know that not all students have connectivity. So we're going to talk about some resources and ways that you can kind of get around that connectivity barrier, as well as also just offer support for a different learning application, because maybe, you know, some students we have a lot of Google Meets and meetings going on, so maybe some things to think about for asynchronous work applications for SchoolNet. So the first thing I would like for you to do is actually sit back and take a test at SchoolNet through the lens of a student. So I've developed a test, and we're going to use the logins that are linked here on slide 5. And so when you click on the student logins link, you should be taken to a Google Sheet, which has over 200 logins. So pick a login, pick a row, and use that login information to log into our training site. So I'm going to model this in just a second, but I wanted to give everyone a chance to get to slide 5, and you're going to click on the link for student logins. And we're actually going to begin by taking a test as a student in SchoolNet. All right, so when I click on this link that I'll also put in the chat, you're just going to go down to any row that you want and pick a student. You'll notice that the password is the same for all, and the test passcode is also the same for all. So I'm going to go ahead and open up a new tab in my browser. And we're going to go to the link at the top of the document, which is bit.ly SN training 2. And for that username, I'm going to come back to that spreadsheet and copy that student. And then I'm going to type in home base, because the password for all of these is home base. You might see a screen like this that says terms of use if you just click on accept. And then you're going to see a home screen, and this is exactly what our students see when they log into SchoolNet. And there's a passcode, and you're just going to go back, copy in the passcode, and say start your test, and then you will actually start the test. If anyone has any difficulties with this, please post in the chat, or you can unmute. But we're going to give everyone about 3 to 4 minutes to log in. It's a 5-question test, so hopefully it shouldn't take very long to complete. Hi, Ramona. We are not having audio right now because we are using the login screen, and we are using these logins and taking a test in Schoolnet. So there's no audio right now because we're giving everyone a couple minutes. All right, we're going to give about 2 more minutes for everyone to at least look at the test. And if you're still having difficulty, let me know in the chat. And I will actually present the test to the screen and share it in a minute in case you are not able to see it. All right, Sandra, I'm going to go ahead and try that student. So we go to bit.ly SN Training 2, and you're going to use that student, but remember there's a space in between the student, the word student, and the number. So I'm going to copy and paste what you put in here, and I'm going to put a space in between student and number. And then the password for all of these logins is the same, home base. And then we enter our passcode, which is Science 6, all uppercase. So it looked like it was working for me. So Sandra, hopefully you can retry. I'm going to not start the test and I'm going to close out. So hopefully you can try that one again. All right, 30 more seconds to finish where you are. And if you want to go ahead and submit your results, that's fine. And if you weren't able to finish, that's also okay. We're going to go over the test, but hopefully most of you were at least able to look at it and get it to load and look at least the first question or two. All right, so on this slide, I've asked, what do you notice and note about the test? So anyone who is able to look at the test or complete it, if you want to either unmute and start a conversation, that's fine. Or if you'd like to put in the chat something you noticed about the test or something you noted. All right, so I'm going to share a few things that put in the chat. The reference materials, the ability to incorporate the presentation. Ramona said that she loved the variation and the drag and drop. So have any of you ever given a test in Schoolnet similar to this one? So with this time of blended and virtual learning, I really got me thinking about what I would do if I was in the classroom. So I used to teach middle school social studies and also high school social studies. And that's my background. So I was really kind of coming at it from the lens of not only, what I would do, but also some things that maybe I've seen others do because my son's in fourth grade. So I have that parent experience as well. And, we have a lot of activities for our students, and I'm thinking about how we could simplify those processes. So, the assessment that you guys took wasn't really what I would deem an assessment because, you had the reference material available. So I am going to go ahead and we're going to look at the test and just kind of show some examples of it. So I'm going to start with going into our test details. And we're going to I'm going to briefly show the test for those of you who may not have been able to get it to load. So when you previewed the test, and it might take a minute to load depending on your internet and if you're also sharing your screen or all these other things. You can do it, internet, you can do it. Um, so with this test in mind, I was really developing more of a classroom activity, but I wanted to take advantage of the functionality that Schoolnet has of being able to, one, be accessible from home because Schoolnet is something that students can log into from home. I also wanted to take advantage of the grade passback capability. So SchoolNet gives us, the abilities to pass back grades directly into our grade book without us, having to create that assignment. And I also wanted to take advantage of the standards-based reporting, right? So after completing that assessment, students, I would have feedback, and that we'll take a look at in just a second. And I'm going to close and retry and see if maybe it'll load for me. Maybe it just got hung there. There we go. All right. Sometimes you just have to be patient. So basically, this is a 5-question. I would call it more of an activity, but basically, the students have an embedded slide deck that they can look at and review. Notice, did any of you notice that there were videos in the slide deck, and they actually work within Schoolnet? So the student could actually watch the video that's being presented, as well as look at all the information. And then I asked them some questions based on the slide deck, right? So for this question, this is gap match is this type of item that's in Schoolnet. So with the gap match, we can go down here and, all right, so our first layer is we have the crust and then the mantle and then the outer core and the inner core. Tectonic plates was just a distractor. And then you can also calculate score. So this button here, students don't see. This is just for what is the teacher when you're presenting the question. All right, and the next question was just a true or false. And then the next question was one of our hotspot items. So in SchoolNet, you can upload an image and have students click on the correct. So lithosphere, I believe, was part of the mantle. Yes. And so the mantle is the second layer. So you click on it and you notice how it became highlighted there. And then the last one was next to last one is a drag and drop, where you drag and drop different characteristics, right? So I said crust or a mantle, right? And so, you know, we can go in here and drag and drop. I wanted to show an example of how this could be used with something beyond, you know, early elementary, because I feel like a lot of times when we think of drag and drop, we might think of elementary, but there's really a lot of applications for a drag and drop type item whenever we have different attributes or different things that we can categorize and have our students kind of apply some more higher level thinking. Right. And so calculate score. And then the last question, you know, was a checklist, right? So they had to check multiple questions about the question. All right. So any questions about these different examples and item types now that we've had a chance to look at it? I know you all want to know how I made this test. So when I made this test, I did make this test manually. It does not have items from the item bank, but you could if you found a resource video or slideshow that went with items from the item bank. So I'm going to go into I'm going to go ahead and make a copy of the test because I can't change this test while students are taking it. So I'm going to make a copy of the test real quick, and then that'll show you how I put the Google slide presentation into the test questions. So I did basically the same process for each question. First of all, you have to have your slideshow, and this is the slideshow I used. And so when you go into your slideshow, you go into File, and you go to Publish to the Web. And instead of doing a link, you're going to do embed. And you notice it has different sizes. I don't like any of these sizes in SchoolNet. I had to kind of play around and get the best size. The best size that I found was going into custom, and where the window is for width, I did 600 because that seems to be, if you go larger than 700, depending on what device the student is testing on, it may add scroll bars. So I did 600. And then down here at the bottom is this is the actual code that you copy. So I copied that code, and then in my SchoolNet test, when I go into edit items, for each item of the test, I made sure that in the content field here, when you go into edit in the SchoolNet, there's these two little carrots that if you click on, it's actually the code. And so you'll see that code is right here. So if I take that code out and save, you'll notice my slideshow is gone. But if I go back into the two carrots and I paste that code from my slide deck and save, it's now visible in there. So the size I used was 600, and so I just did a custom size, and then I changed the width to 600, and it automatically changed the height to 366. So that was the size. And then in SchoolNet, you just have to go through each one of your items and put that code with the same thing, following the carets and pasting that code again. So for this example, it was a Google slideshow, but you can also embed other things. So you could embed things like a YouTube video. You could embed other resources, like even a Quizlet page I've embedded. You could embed, if you had any type of like a Google Doc or any type of content that you wanted to put into your SchoolNet assessment, you could, right? So basically what I'm doing is I'm kind of stretching the idea of assessment into more of a activity that students can complete, and it would still give me that standards-based feedback and also put the grades in my Power Teacher Pro gradebook. So just, some different ideas to help you understand and think about the possibilities of what you could do in a SchoolNet test. Um, so any other thoughts or ideas about what you might want to put in a test or in an assessment? Things you could embed? All right, we're going to keep on moving if there's letting your wheels spin here. So things to think about. So you notice that on this slide deck, I did have some videos. You want to make sure that the videos work. It's very important if you embed anything in the SchoolNet test that you preview it before you let students try to take it, just to make sure everything embeds correctly and everything works how you expect it to. So that's always just a really important step, is that you preview that online test. If you want more instructions and details about how to create these different items, like the hotspots and the gap match and the drag and drop, our October SchoolNet webinar is going to talk about how to make all of those things, and I've got a link to that in our slide deck, but just wanted to let you know there is an upcoming webinar, because that really needs a webinar in itself, making these different item types within SchoolNet. All right, so I'm going to look at just my reporting here real quick, just to show you how it looks with our test. So we had 8 of you were able to complete, right? And so I see that standards analysis, there was 1 standard on this test. So I can see that overall performance. I can also go in and look at my item analysis. And just a key note about item analysis, it does take a few hours to generate after a test. So we'll be able to come back and see this in a more complete manner within a few hours. But you can see student results, and if I go down into an individual middle school, it'll pull up the results for that particular those students, and I can view their results. So any questions? Yeah, so the data is really important, right? I can't think of too many, you can use things like Edpuzzle or Loom to add questions into a video, but they're not going to give you the reporting that SchoolNet gives you. And if you'll notice, I tried to stay away from multiple choice questions during that assessment, because I really wanted you to see the range of possibilities that are in a SchoolNet assessment. And I also feel like that's a way to more directly increase the rigor if you give students things other than what they're used to, right? They're used to multiple choice questions. So if you're giving them the resource that you um, if you're giving them the resource, like I gave them the slide deck that had all the information in it, then I felt like my questions needed to be a little bit more interactive and engaging and rigorous. So just some thoughts there that kind of went through my head. So how do you access SchoolNet? So SchoolNet is accessed through the NC Ed Cloud. So you actually are going to go to your NC Ed Cloud, log in, and then on that tray of applications, SchoolNet is the one with the red house. So that's how you can get to SchoolNet. So we're going to go back into the presentation now, but hopefully that a little activity there to start it off kind of helped open your eyes to some of the things that maybe we can do with SchoolNet, aside from just traditional assessments and the way we think of assessments. So some SchoolNet from online learning, just some tips. So as I mentioned before, SchoolNet is available from home. Students can log into the NCED Cloud and they access SchoolNet the same way that they do at school. They click on that red house icon. SchoolNet is pretty device friendly, works on laptops, desktops, Chromebooks. Tablets are okay. I've even heard people taking cell phones, like an iPhone. But just keep in mind that a laptop, desktop, or Chromebook is always going to be a better choice than a tablet or a cell phone. iPads seem to be working fairly well as long as it's an iPad that is recently updated. I know I have an old iPad at my house and has stopped updating several, probably, a year or two ago. And so that one I wouldn't expect SchoolNet to work on. I did link in here the system requirements for SchoolNet. So if you ever get a question about what is needed for SchoolNet, you can link to it right there as far as system requirements. Just some ideas for testing at home. SchoolNet does have a secure tester, which is a lockdown browser. I only advise you to use that though if you're sure that the students have that lockdown browser installed on their device. So if if you've issued Chromebooks to your students within your district and you know that your technology services team has pushed down the lockdown browser, the secure tester, then I would feel comfortable using it. But with our current, blend of maybe some devices that are personally owned and then, some older devices that may be at the house, I wouldn't use Secure Tester unless you were sure. Just because Secure Tester will prompt the student to download an application and that may or may not work depending on their device. And as you kind of saw today, SchoolNet can take a few minutes to load a test, especially if you have those interactive elements like I had with the slide deck and the videos. Note that it can take a minute or two to load. And so I would encourage you to tell your students that, and also maybe even modeling with a screencast, which is coming up to one of our challenges that I've built into this presentation. There is a troubleshooting document that I'd like to give a shout out to Melissa Boyce at Alamance Burlington School System for creating, and I've linked that here. So that is something that you could send home with your parents or students to post it in your Google Classroom or Canvas course for them if they are starting to have issues with accessing a SchoolNet test at home. It walks them through like how they can clear their cache and their cookies on their internet browser, just those basic steps that honestly you could probably use that document for any tool, not just SchoolNet, because it's, just basic web practices that we're having to be more familiar with now. One thing that is there on SchoolNet is that you can resume students' tests for them. So if they are in the middle of taking a test and their internet goes out, you can actually resume the test for them so they can go back in and take that test again. And it saves their answers, but not always. So sometimes they might have lost a couple of questions of progress, depending on when it last saved their progress. All right, so I do have a couple of instructional challenges in this slide deck, and that is just something for you to think about. So, creating that short assessment in SchoolNet, previewing it just like I did with my assessment that I created, and maybe even recording your screen as you kind of talk the students through the test. Show them the different options, like how they can highlight, how they can cross out incorrect answer choices, those kinds of things. They may not ever notice what all those buttons across the top of the screen are. So, that little video might be helpful. And I say you get bonus points if you have a school age child and you can talk them through how they log in. They should be probably pros at logging in by now, but it never hurts, right? So a couple of things. Another reason why we should be using SchoolNet in my book is because SchoolNet does support accommodations for students. So things like read aloud. Now, obviously, with the example I showed, the read aloud is not going to read the content in the slide deck. So whatever you embed, whether it's a video or a slide deck or something like that, that is not going to, the read aloud is not going to read that, but it will read your instructions, anything that you type in to the test, and of course your questions and answer choices. Also, SchoolNet supports things like extended time, line readers, and color contrast. A lot of those Web 2.0 tools that are really popular right now don't have these accommodations in place. So this is another, I think, feather in the cap for SchoolNet and why we should be using it, even just for like a classroom activity, which was more of what I would categorize the assessment that I created. That would be more of a classroom activity versus an assessment. I do have a link here to the accommodation setup. So in SchoolNet, it's a two-part process. You have to go into the individual student's profile and mark their PNP, which is on their profile with their accommodations according to their 504 or IEP plan. And then you also have to, when you set up a test, you have to enable the accommodations. So as long as you've enabled the accommodations on your test and the student has their profile marked with what accommodations they should get, then when they take that assessment, classroom activity, whatever you want to design in SchoolNet and enable it, they will have those accommodations that they're required to have. Any questions about accommodations? Because I know that's something that a lot of folks have questions about usually. Yes, Connie, I agree. It's great. All right, so let's talk about offline use. So in SchoolNet, we do have instructional materials, lesson plans that you can print or save. Um, I'm glad you're taking feverish notes. Please note the session is going to be recorded and you'll have a link to the recording as well, so you can go back through it at your own time. So in addition to assessment items, SchoolNet has all of these instructional materials, over 60,000, that you can use, and they're free and they're aligned to North Carolina Standard Course of Study. So these materials and assessments, you can save them, you can download them as a PDF, put them in your Google Classroom, put them in Canvas. So if you're looking for some more resources, I would encourage you to look in SchoolNet. And then for our K1 students, I always get questions about our younger students. There is a certain publisher called Aquella that has a large amount of picture-based read aloud passages with questions that you could certainly print those or save them as a PDF and put them in your Google Classroom. So I know with our current virtual and blended learning with our K1 students, you're looking for things that parents can help with, and these passages are really nice because they have a teacher guide with them that spells out everything you're supposed to do word for word. So in my mind, that would be something that I could give a parent and they would know what to do, because as long as I give them the teacher guide, it says step by step what to do. So, or you could also even think about, if you wanted to make it kind of more independent, you could record yourself on your screen using one of these K1 passages, and go through it with the student, and then just have them watch it. So that's another idea for that. And then the other thing I want to point out is that SchoolNet is not just for core. There are lesson plans for CTE. There's art, music, health, and physical education, pre-K resources. So you know, I put in there where my school counselor's at, because I know, a lot of times our enhancement classes and our school counselors and things are running small groups right now during this time. And so SchoolNet could be a good source of information for them as well, to help them plan their information. All right, so I'm going to take a second, because I have SchoolNet pulled up at the training site, just to show you where these instructional materials are, and then we'll come back. All right, so I've logged into SchoolNet right here. There you go. And so if I go over here under Instructional Materials, this is where the magic is at, right? So if I go in here and just type in music, and then maybe I filter by arts education, and then I can go down and look at, maybe I'm doing 4th grade. All right, can anyone else not see my screen? Can anyone see my screen? give me a yes or a yay in the chat if you can see my screen, just to make sure. Okay. All right. Awesome. Thank you for that. So I've typed in music, and I've gone in here and notice there's 2 tabs. So for 4th grade music, there's 396 materials within SchoolNet, and then there's also a second tab called Go Open NC. So Go Open NC is our openly licensed educational resources, and you can actually search Go Open NC from within SchoolNet, which is really cool. And Go Open NC has single sign-on. So if I go into any of these resources and I like them, I can actually click on it and open it up. So I'm going to go through some of these materials here, and here's a music staff review game. All right, so I can go and click on it. Oh. And of course, the one I pick is not working right now. All right, so we'll look at this one. A Ram Sam Sam. And this one as well. All right. We'll go here. Really? Is it just me? Is my internet down? Let's try a different. Here we go. All right, so here's a lesson from the Denver Art Museum. All right, so this lesson comes up, and resource that we can use, and we could definitely share this into our Google Classroom or into your Canvas, depending on what you're using. The nice thing is too, is you can click here and save it to add it to your list of favorites. So under Instructional Materials, when you go to My Materials, there's that list, and you can see materials that you have saved. And so just a quick thought about how you can maybe use, let's go in and do fractions. And there might not be anything for arts education. Or actually there was a music lesson. That was cool. So here's an activity for 4th grade math. And the nice thing is, in addition to saving, you can also see that there's an express test. So if I wanted to look for some questions based on the content that this video showed, understanding fraction equivalence and ordering, I could click on this Build Express Test, and it's going to pull questions related to that standard in SchoolNet and help me build a quick assessment. So that's a nice feature to have right there in SchoolNet. All right, any questions about the instructional materials in SchoolNet? Any thoughts about things that maybe you could go and look for? All right. So another thought, another way to use SchoolNet is that we have a bank of released items. And these released items are for our EOGs and EOCs, except for ELA. We don't have the newest ELA items due to a copyright agreement. But these released items are there. There is a bank, and you can, I've got some links here to create an assessment or also print or download copies of these assessments. You could also think about using maybe a couple of these released items as building a classroom activity similar to the one I showed earlier. So if we go back into SchoolNet, and I go under assessments, and then I go to item banks, which has the little briefcase icon. Yeah, I'm in the training site, so you'll see some extra training banks that we don't have in our production site. But that released bank, as if they're in alphabetical order, right? So here's our NCDPI released bank. We can see there's 1,300 items. So if I open them up and I go into my filters, and maybe I'm just going to look for 5th grade, and we'll do science. So now these are my 5th grade science items that are released. So I could certainly use the checkboxes to create a little activity. So I would look at them and maybe look at looking at them through a theme, right? So, all right, so this one's talking about weather and clouds, right? So this is also a weather question. And then here's another weather. All right, and here's another. Okay, so I can take these 4 items and add it to a test. And I can click on create a new test. And maybe I'm just gonna call this, weather review activity. And go down here to our sciences. And then our standards document has to match our subject area, so science and science. And I'm just going to make this in my classroom. I'm not going to worry about anything other than under test settings. This is where we can set up those accommodations for those students who need them. And then one new feature is that under test restrictions, we can hide the correct answer choices for our students. So this is something that North Carolina And yes, so Sandra is asking about, is there PD on actually assigning ELA SchoolNet testing materials? Yes. So we actually had webinars yesterday where I went through the process of creating a test. So those will be updated on our SchoolNet webpage within probably a few days. So probably by Monday, I'll have that video on our YouTube channel that I've linked later on in our slides, and you can watch that video. All right, so hide correct answer choices, generate test. All right, and so now I already have my questions, right? Because I'm doing the same kind of activity that I did earlier. So now I just need to find a resource to help my students work through this, right? And then I'm going to use that embed code. So I can go out to YouTube, or maybe I already have a slide deck on weather air masses is what some of these questions we're talking about, and embed that, and then I have it ready to go, right? Because I've already used items from that released item bank. So the students are getting practice on the types of items that they'll see at the end of 5th grade. And then they're also getting the review material, and I'm getting all of that standards-based feedback in SchoolNet from them completing this activity. And if I wanted to, I could even collect this as a grade and put it right into my Power Teacher Pro gradebook. So any questions as you kind of think about and walk through that? All right, so I do have another instructional challenge for you to think about and maybe share. Find a material and that you could use, an instructional material, maybe in SchoolNet or Go Open and See, and practice downloading the resource and plan how you'll share it, whether you're going to put it in your learning management system, whether you're going to download it as a PDF, whether you're going to put it into Google Classroom. Just kind of be thinking about how that sharing and delivery method is going to work for your students. So I do have a few more resources that I want to take a few minutes to explain that are linked on the slide deck. So this first one here on slide 13 is SchoolNet in a blended learning classroom. So this is where I've gone through and kind of made a quick reference guide that goes through a lot of things that I've talked about today. So if you kind of wanted a nutshell of how to share this presentation, you could definitely take this slide deck along with this resource guide right here, and you'll have a lot of things to think about. I've also included in here some getting started resources with SchoolNet. So if you're wondering, okay, Pam, you said I can put this in Canvas. I've got a link right here to our guide for how to link into a Canvas course. I also have a link right here for gradebook and how the sharing to gradebook works. I've also got the accommodations, scheduling and assessment, a webinar recording as well for getting started with SchoolNet. I'll update that with the webinar I did yesterday because that's the newest version of that getting started webinar. And then some more ideas, right? So I've even got things like you can put a whiteboard into SchoolNet. So using a app, you can embed a whiteboard space, which I know makes our math teachers very excited. So that way students could be working on problems on a whiteboard while they're got their math questions up. So there's a lot of different ideas that I tried to provide in here. So the next resource is that Go Open and See. So this kind of walks you through how the Go Open and See integration works, what you can use it for, um, step-by-step instructions, um, how to go ahead and create an express test in Schoolnet with a resource from Go Open NC, just different steps. And then I also put in here, this is a frequently asked question. So the at the end of the year, our tests use the EOCs and EOGs use North Carolina Desmos. We do not have the Desmos calculators built into Schoolnet. The calculators that are built in are just normal calculators. They're not the exact same as what students use, but you can embed that Desmos calculator into each question that you want students to be able to have access to the calculator to use. So this links to another document that walks you through specifically how to do that. So it's the same method as embedding anything else that I showed you earlier. We get our code, and then we go into a question and use those carets to paste the embed code and click on OK. And then the calculator is now embedded into that question for the students to use. So if you're looking for how students can get practice with the same calculator tool that they're going to have on their end of course or end of grade tests, you can definitely use this guide here. So please feel free to share these resources. One other thing I wanted to share with you is we still have our back to school videos that are up. So if you are new to Schoolnet and you're like, I just really want to learn from the beginning, we have these 3 mini webinars that you can watch. They're about a half hour each, and then you can actually fill out a form to earn CEU credit for them. And you can learn more by going to this link right here, the bit.ly home base, back to school 20. And then, of course, we have our monthly webinars. So yesterday was our webinars on creating assessments using items from the item bank and passages from the item bank. Next month is our create your own items and item bank. So similar to the test we did today, I'm going to explain more in detail about the items. So how to make like a gap match, how to do drag and drop, hotspot items, those very specific item types. We're going to go through and create each one of those. And then you'll see that these webinar links are here where you can register. So we have them at 10 a.m., 3 p.m., and 7 p.m. So hopefully one of those 3 options will fit your calendar. And then all of our webinars go on our YouTube playlist, which is this link up here in the top corner. So I will be updating the webinars from yesterday with the recording up here, so you'll be able to watch that. Couple of new things for this year is I have a video, 5-minute video there on how to link a Schoolnet assessment into a Canvas course. So in addition to the instructions I linked, I also made a video of it. And then I also talked about for CTE teachers specifically, how to find your items and build a test. So I made a tutorial specifically for our CTE teachers. So if you want to share that with them, please feel free to do that. I'm always open to adding more resources to our YouTube channel. All right, so I'm gonna X out of here and I would love to have any questions. We have a few minutes left in the section and I'm also gonna put up this QR code for you to do your attendance. If for whatever reason the QR code doesn't work, you can fill out this form and you get attendance that way. So we have about 10 minutes, so feel free to ask me any questions and get your credit for attending today's session. And thank you, Ramona. Ramona put in the link to the chat for our SchoolNet Google site too. That has a lot of these resources linked in it.